Hey, friends. As we wrap up 2024, I find myself, like everyone, reflecting on the past year and thinking deeply about the future. And to be real here, it's been a year of big changes and personal discovery for me. From starting new opportunities to learning to trust my voice, the ongoing theme I keep coming to is the importance of feeding curiosity, to ask questions, and take the time to understand new proposed theories. The sheer amount of things still left to unveil in this wild world never ceases to amaze me. And it's truly fulfilling to learn about the real-world applications of science, and such an honor to get to share my findings with all of you. Listeners of the pod know, over the past month, I've been calling out to you specifically to find out what wacky science questions and curiosities you have as we wrap up the year. And boy, oh boy, did you deliver.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Kate.
I'm wondering.
You've got mail.
I have a lot of questions.
My question is,
I love that you're taking the opportunity to answer some questions because I have a few.
From the Stowers Institute for Medical Research and KCUR studios in Kansas City, this is Seeking a Scientist, a podcast where science fiction meets reality. I'm Dr. Kate Bieberdorf, aka Kate the Chemist, and on this special end-of-the-year episode, we're celebrating my two favorite things, you and science. I've selected 10 of my favorite submitted questions, and I'm going to do my very best to answer them all in a simple and concise manner. Be prepared for snowflakes, trash in space,
Garbage.
cat puzzles, and more. You ready? All right, let's get started. These first questions are in some ways connected to episodes we've covered over the past 2 years. This first one comes from a science educator in my new neck of the woods.
My name is Allie. I am a middle school science teacher in South Bend, just about a mile down the road from Notre Dame. I've been enjoying your books and your podcast. I'm not new to teaching, but I am fairly new to teaching science. One thing that I have on my mind is I teach students that metals are conductors and they transport heat and electricity well. And as I'm teaching this, they're questioning me, well, all of our water bottles we are holding, these heavy duty stainless steel water bottles, keep their drinks nice and cold, or if it's something warm, keep it nice and toasty. So how can I better explain that the construction of these water bottles, maybe not necessarily the materials, are working in their favor for keeping their drinks either warm or cold?
So first off, Allie, you are correct. Metals are conductors that can transport both heat and electricity, but some are better than others. Silver, copper, and gold are our best conductors of electricity. Silver is numero uno, but it's pretty pricey, so we tend to use copper instead. These three metals are all particularly good at conducting electricity because they have what we call a sea of electrons, meaning their electrons are loosely bound and can easily move from one atom to another. To picture this, imagine you and your siblings playing dodgeball in the basement of your house. The balls, aka the electrons, can easily move from one person to the next without ever leaving the basement. That's kinda how metals conduct electricity. And this is a great question because I see those giant water bottles everywhere,
drawing screams of excitement and tears of joy. This year's hottest status symbol and most coveted holiday gift
I got a Stanley!
is the Stanley Tumbler.
Personally, I have an emotional support hydro flask that I take with me everywhere I go, so no judgment from me. It's my favorite because it has a temp shield, so basically a cup inside another cup. And here's the important part. There's a vacuum between the two cups. During manufacturing, they removed all the molecules between the inner wall and the outer wall, so heat cannot be transferred from one cup to the other. Let's say your students have hot chocolate in their bottles. All that heat, the thermal energy, will stay within that inner cup until the kiddos break the seal and open the bottle to drink their hot cocoa. In theory, if they were to keep their hydro flask closed the entire time, the liquid would stay piping hot. It's even less of a challenge to keep a drink chilled because the molecules aren't moving as quickly and there isn't any steam. As long as you keep hot air out of your flask, your drink will stay icy cold for hours. And while we're on the topic of water bottles, thank you to everyone that switched over from disposable plastic water bottles to reusable water bottles. To me, it feels like a small but important step we can take to address the problem of microplastics. Remember how we did an entire episode on the plastic waste in the ocean? Our second episode, titled, Can We Save the Oceans from Plastic?
It's not about doom and gloom. We have to design the future that we hope for.
This next question is connected to that.
Hi, Kate. This is Regina, and my question is about microplastics. We all know that they're everywhere, but isn't plastic inert or non-reactive? I mean, isn't that why we use it to package everything? If that's the case, why are microplastics so bad in our environment?
Great question, Regina. Scientists use the word inert to describe a molecule that does not react easily and likes to hang out by itself.
I'm good with it. I like being alone.
I can get behind the idea of calling plastics inert because they are big, and I mean big molecules that tend to be insoluble. However, that doesn't mean that they are unbreakable. Take plastic wrap. Give a toddler some plastic wrap, and they will shred it into 1,000,000 pieces. And if any one of those pieces end up being smaller than 5 millimeters, they are called microplastics. These tiny pieces of plastic are not reactive in the traditional sense of the word, but they can act like physical blockers, just like fat clogs our arteries. Microplastics can mess with our drainage and water systems, be eaten by marine life, and even be absorbed by human tissues. And why you should especially care about microplastics is because new studies are showing that they can damage our DNA and change our gene activity, 2 factors known to be heavy contributors of cancer. So the fact of the matter is, reducing plastic consumption is a step we can take to avoid adverse health effects and help out the big blue planet we call home. Okay, let's shift our focus to beyond this planet and to perhaps a more lighthearted topic, like space exploration. We did 2 episodes about it this year. Episode 9, Can We Stop an Asteroid from Hitting the Earth?, where Nancy Chabot's team crashed a spacecraft into a moon to see if they could change its orbit.
3, 2, 1.
And episode 16, How Living in Outer Space Changes the Human Body, where NASA astronaut Kate Rubins explained the concept of microgravity. Potentially inspired by some of what we touched on in those episodes, we got this question from Kyrie, who might be one of our youngest listeners.
Hi, Kate. My question is, why doesn't the moon not spin? Why can't we see the other side of the moon?
Thank you, Kyrie. I'm so happy to hear that you listen. And I love this question because I used to think that the moon didn't spin either. But guess what? The moon does spin. There's a neat phenomenon called tidal locking, where the moon and the Earth are in synchronous rotation. Basically, the moon rotates at the same rate it orbits the Earth. So even though the moon is spinning, when observing it from Earth's surface, we can only see one side of the moon. If you want to see what the dark side of the moon looks like, Google the images captured in 2015 by the Deep Space Climate Observatory satellite called Discover. They are absolutely stunning.
Hi Kate, my name's Sam. I'm 15, calling in from Scotland. And I'm just curious as to what the future of space stations is going to be like now that the ISS is getting decommissioned in 2030.
Well, Sam from Scotland, you're right. The International Space Station has had a constant leak for the past 5 years. It's not a life-threatening issue for anyone on board, but we do find ourselves continuously needing to resupply the oxygen. And the bigger problem is NASA and Roscosmos, Russia's space agency, disagree on how to fix it. This, in addition to the introduction of commercialized space travel, is forcing all the major space agencies to rethink space exploration. When the ISS crashes into the ocean in a few years, it sadly won't be replaced by the government. Instead, we're looking at a future of commercialized spaceflight. NASA will collaborate with companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, and they'll work together to conduct their missions in microgravity, which, don't forget, you could benefit from too. In a few years, instead of going scuba diving on vacation, tourists with deep pockets could go on a low Earth orbit excursion. Imagine how cool it would be to go to the airport and get on some kind of rocket plane that takes you so high up that you can see the entire planet from your window seat. You can experience weightlessness, feel your hair lift off your head, and enjoy the best view of our universe. Who knows? You might even be able to see the Gateway, which is being dubbed humanity's first space station around the moon, and is expected to launch in the coming years. After that, the next step is putting a man or a woman on Mars, which NASA astronaut Kate Rubins thinks we will be able to accomplish within the next 20 years. Speaking of astronaut Kate, this next question is about a small part of her daily life on the ISS, something she definitely can't ignore. Take it away, Alex.
Where does your trash go?
Oh, great question. Yeah, trash management is a huge thing on station. So we've got trash bags. One thing we have to work really hard at is compacting this trash, because you put trash in the bag and it like floats up. So things like food wrappers, it can be really hard to compact them. And so taking out the trash is like a physical exercise. It's like you're like wrestling with something. You got to take the trash and you like compress it and you hug it, you squeeze all the air out, and then you got to wrap it with tape like really quickly before it starts to expand again. And then we put those little bundles of trash in a spacecraft that's going to come back and burn up in the space atmosphere. We don't want to litter space, right? Space junk is a huge problem for us from satellites and old rocket parts. So we don't want to eject any trash outside the space station. And so we put it in a vehicle that we know is going to safely burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. And that there's a small amount of material and scientific equipment that will come home on a SpaceX vehicle. And that's actually coming back to Earth, and it's not burning up.
See? Thinking about waste and ways to reduce it is not just a problem on our planet. It's universal. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because up next, we're digging into an animal that has been called biologically immortal. You do not want to miss it. For this next wave of questions, I wanted to look into some fascinating topics that we have yet to cover on the pod.
Hi, Kate. My name is Carrie, and I heard that there are jellyfish that can make themselves younger when they're stressed. My question is, how and why do they do this? And are there any implications for humans?
Carrie, you are correct. The immortal jellyfish, aka the Turritopsis dohrnii, is tiny, only 4.5 millimeters wide. That's about the size of 3 grains of sand. With a bright red stomach and up to 90 white tentacles, this little sea jelly is seriously gorgeous. If the Turritopsis dohrnii gets injured through physical damage, stress, or even starvation, it is able to transform itself back into a polyp as a means of survival. How this works is, first, the jellyfish turns in on itself, absorbing its tentacles and sinking to the ocean floor, since it can no longer swim. Then, over the next day or so, it converts into a blob-like cyst, which then converts into a polyp. In this context, a polyp is a hollow-bodied animal that looks like a small cylinder, like a pencil. One end is attached to the cyst, and the other end is a mouth with tentacles. Over time, the polyp begins to grow buds, which you can kind of think of as jellyfish fetuses that are genetically identical to the injured adult. Once released into the ocean, they mature into adult jellyfish as the last part of the never-ending cycle of life. Carrie, you also asked about the implications for humans, and I wish I had a better answer for y'all, but the truth is that this is just not an option for humans in 2024. Will doctors someday be able to regenerate humans? Maybe, but I'm not going to pretend like I can predict the future. Okay, moving on. I'm a huge animal lover, so we did some really fun animal episodes this year, like episode 14, How Can We Bring Extinct Species Back from the Dead? And episode 12, Dogs Are Talking, Are You Listening?
I love you. Good girl.
Somehow, we never got around to cats this season, though. So this next question from Liz immediately piqued my interest, especially since my cat passed away during the Thanksgiving holiday, and it made me think of her.
Hi, Kate. This is Liz. I'm wondering if there's a behavioral reason behind why cats love laying on puzzles. I had sent in a couple of photos of my lovely babies, and sometimes there can be up to 3 or 4 on my puzzle at the same time, and that makes puzzling a little difficult.
Too funny. So, Liz, I have a few answers for you. Let's go with perhaps the most obvious explanation first. Your cat wants your attention. It's the same reason they like to sit between you and your book, on your laptop, on your sewing needles. They love you. A more scientific answer, however, is that you may be tapping into your cat's prey instincts. Moving the different puzzle pieces around, especially if you solve them quickly, could be clicking their brains over to predator mode. If you see a few tail flicks or some quick paw movements, there is a good chance your cat is thinking puzzles equals hunting time.
Meow, 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 meow.
Then again, if they are just napping quietly on your puzzle, it could be as straightforward as them liking the texture or scent of the puzzle. Speaking of napping and slowing things down, is there something that helps you relax? Something you go to when you need some peace and quiet?
Hey, Kate, this is Sally. My question is there a sound frequency that is calming to humans? For example, like when Buddhists ring bells during their meditation, or when people meditate, there seems to be a sound sometimes associated with it.
I've got to be real with you, Sally. I think this is a to each their own kind of thing. For example, some people love sound bowls in their yoga classes or white noise machines to help them fall asleep, but both of those sounds are like nails on a chalkboard for me. But your question intrigued me, so I did some digging, and I found a study out of Mind Lab International that discovered that listening to the song Weightless by Marconi Union reduced their participants' anxiety by 65%. It also decreased the physiological resting rates by about 35%. Now, I feel obligated to point out that this was a small study, so take it with a grain of salt, but the song was written with the help of sound therapists. Its composition was carefully constructed to try to lower the listener's heart rate, their stress levels, and their blood pressure. I'll be honest, I was quite skeptical at first, but it's honestly a really lovely song. Here's a little taste so you can hear for yourself. Maybe it's because it's the season for it, but when I close my eyes and listen to that music, all I see is a winter wonderland with beautiful snowflakes falling from the sky.
Hey, Kate, this is Pam. And ever since I was a kid, I've heard about there being no two snowflakes that are the same. And when I think about all the snowflakes in all the world and all the mountains and all the winters we've had, I just can't believe that that's possible. What are the odds that that is actually true?
Pam, I know this may surprise you, but I think it's very likely that this is true. Even if two snowflakes look identical to the naked eye, under a microscope, they will look very different. Like many things, it comes down to my favorite subject in the world, chemistry. Snowflakes are mostly water molecules mixed in with a little dust. Water's chemical composition is H2O, so there are 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom for every 1 water molecule. But don't assume that all hydrogen atoms are identical. That's a rookie mistake. In a typical hydrogen atom, there is 1 proton and 1 electron. But sometimes it can also carry a neutron. That's when we call the atom deuterium, not hydrogen. If we look at 5,000 molecules of water, usually one of them will have a deuterium atom in place of the typical hydrogen atom. So imagine taking a quintillion water molecules, that's 10 to the 18th molecules, and arranging them together to form a snowflake. Now, grab another quintillion water molecules and try to make the exact same snowflake, matching up every hydrogen and deuterium atom. It would be nearly impossible, right? And I didn't even get into all the weird stuff that's happening with oxygen. Okay, y'all, we're now at the final question. I think it's the perfect way to wrap up the year.
Hi, Kate. My name is Christina, and I was wondering, since it's the end of the year, what in the various sciences is giving you hope? What kind of new developments or experiments or technologies are inspiring you to keep going as we enter this new year?
Wow, Christina, how much time do you have? So it's hard to pick because scientists have been on their A game this year, but I narrowed it down to a few stories that I'm following closely. Number 1, for the first time ever, wind and solar produced more power than coal for 7 consecutive months this year. If we can avoid really bad winter storms for the remainder of the year, we might set another record for renewable versus non-renewable energy produced in a single year. Number 2, the FDA approved 2 new drugs that helps to slow the progression of Niemann-Pick type C, a rare disease caused by the inability to transport cholesterol and other lipids into the cells. This awful disease claimed the lives of 3 of Ara Parseghian's grandchildren. And for the non-football fan listeners out there, Ara Parseghian is the beloved Notre Dame football coach that started a foundation to find a cure for this horrific rare disease. And now, here we are, after 30 years of hard work and determination, and they are finally finding some answers. That brings me to my third favorite science story of the year, the World Mosquito Program. It's doing amazing work using a naturally occurring bacteria called Wolbachia to basically boost mosquitoes' immune systems. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but it's not. Typically, we get viruses like Zika, yellow fever, and dengue from mosquitoes. But now that they've got something akin to emergency in their veins, they can fight these viruses before they ever even make it to us. On the Indonesian island of Java, researchers saw a 77% decrease in dengue fever incidents. Mighty bacteria saving the day. Friends, I'm so grateful to live in a time where I get to witness these tenacious and creative scientists using ingenious ideas to make the world a better place. And while I'm throwing out thank yous, let me take a minute to thank you, too. Thank you for your interest in science and for subscribing to the pod. It gives me hope, and it really helps us make the case for continuing to make this show. Sorry I couldn't get to all of your amazing questions. I was truly overwhelmed by how many were submitted. And if y'all like the vibe of this episode, let me know and I'll definitely do a follow-up. And keep the questions coming. They may spark an idea for a new episode. Seeking a Scientist is a production of KCUR Studios in Kansas City, made possible with support from the Stowers Institute for Medical Research, where scientists work to accelerate our understanding of human health and disease. It's hosted by me, Dr. Kate Bieberdorf, aka Kate the Chemist. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Kate the Chemist, or the pod at Seeking a Sci Pod. Our senior producer is Suzanne Hogan, our editor is Mackenzie Martin, and our digital editor is Gabe Rosenberg. A huge thank you to Olivia Hewitt and Zach Perez, who helped gather all of your questions, and Byron Love, Allison Harris, and Jean-Biev Desmarteau. You heard clips this episode from freesound.org, Idiocracy, TikTok Mr. Kitters the Cat, NBC News, Samaritan, NASA, Pink Floyd, BBC Sound Effects, YouTube user at Gardea23, Meow Mix by JC Chazet for the J.M. Smucker Company, and Marconi Union. Our original theme music is by The Coma Calling, and you heard additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. And please do make sure you're subscribed to the show so you know when we have a new episode. We've got some really fun stuff lined up for y'all next year.
All of a sudden, I'm at 15,000 feet in the bear's ears, hiking all of my crap out on my back, plus research equipment. It was badass, and I felt badass coming out of that.
Surviving extreme cold and deep explorations into memory and sleep. It's going to be great. Wishing you a happy and healthy 2025. Stay nerdy, my friends.